All right. The latest on the war that's happening in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. I wanted to lean on you, Marie, because obviously you worked at the State Department once upon a time. And there's been a lot of stuff that's been happening with the latest on the war. We talked a little bit about it with the uncommitted vote in Michigan right now, but the war itself and what has happened on October 7th, the horrific attacks by Hamas, obviously, and the 1,200 or so Israelis that have been killed. There's still about 150 hostages, I believe, as of this recording, that are still out there that have not been, part of any hostage negotiations. We're still trying to figure out what is happening with that. The Biden administration has mentioned that they were hoping for some type of peace talks and some type of hostage negotiation over. We expected right now, if you're listening to us on a Monday, it was expected by this Monday. We don't think that that's going to happen now. First, before we dive into a couple of different things that people have said media outlet wise from a very prominent Jewish host of a television show, in addition to one of who's now replaced you for years later, and Matthew Miller, a spokesperson for the State Department, something he said. But I just want at a 30,000 overview for you as you're watching this unfold. And now we're, my math sucks. What are we, 5-6 months into this? And we're seeing countless loss of life on the Palestinian side, people that had nothing to do with this conflict or even voted for Hamas, including the kids that have been killed in this. And then obviously the families of these hostages that have not been returned. They're waiting days, months, weeks for these folks. And there's nothing in sight with Bibi Netanyahu, blowing up Gaza to smithereens. And in the process, he's even killed some of the hostages here. What do you make of what's been happening and playing out in the war from a 30,000-foot overview?
Well, I mean, it's a tragedy on every level, starting on October 7th and the terrorist attack by Hamas. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has no idea what he's doing. And I say that not flippantly. I think he has no strategy for actually, quote, defeating Hamas, which I don't even know how you actually, quote, defeat Hamas. You can prevent them from attacking you. You can neutralize the threat, all of that. I understand that. But getting to a place where Hamas is not threatening Israel and what you do with all of the Palestinians, right? I mean, there is a longer term question here. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it very clear that he has no interest in a two-state solution. So then what happens to millions of Palestinians who are not Hamas, right? We have to say that over and over and over and over again. And there's so many things he has done during his time as prime minister that has weakened Israel, made Israel less safe, made Israel less democratic, that I don't think he is, Tom Friedman on the Ezra Klein podcast a couple weeks ago said that Prime Minister Netanyahu was the worst Jewish leader in history. I don't know if I'd go quite that far. It's a long history, but certainly the worst Israeli leader. And I think that the families who are pressing him to do more to get the hostages home, the United States who is pressing him to be more careful and targeted in his attacks in Gaza, the United States who's pressing him to pressure the settlers in the West Bank who are killing Palestinians. He has no plan to maintain Israel as a Jewish democracy in the Middle East, and he's doing things every day to undermine its security and its character as such. And so I think I am very pessimistic about what's happening now. The Biden team is very engaged in the hostage negotiations. They're trying to get these folks home. And I think they will continue pressing Israel, even though on the Palestinian side, there is not a partner. We don't know who will lead the Palestinians at the end of this, for some answer to this question at the end of the day. But I'm in a pretty pessimistic place right now, candidly.
Yeah. I feel the same way, Marie. I did want to ask you. It's apropos that we have you on for this episode because, as we were texting back and forth about talking about this, as some things started to run through my head, and I would love for you to say yes or no, or even talk a little bit more about it because again, you worked for as an advisor to former Secretary of State John Kerry. Obviously, Anthony Blinken is having that job right now, and he's got to go out there and has at least gone out a couple of times to Israel and met with Bibi Netanyahu. First, have you gone? Have you ever met Bibi Netanyahu? And then you're shaking your head. So when the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister are meeting, give our audience a little bit of background of like what those talks are about as somebody having set up these talks and been in those rooms to kind of hear what the conversation is going through. What do you think Blinken's team is saying? Because there's a lot of folks that are in the media, obviously Muslim Arab Americans. Mehdi Hassan comes to mind, a friend of the show here, who has said the Biden administration has levers at their disposal. They control the funding. Israeli officials have said without Papa US and giving some weapons, we can't do most of this work. So we're giving the weapons. Why wouldn't the Biden administration, or at least when the Secretary of State goes out there, why wouldn't they say, look, you're not getting this. Stop right now. Let's come to the table and you're not getting this. Is it that simple as people are making it out in the media as somebody who has been involved in some of these conversations, maybe to a different extent? Are we oversimplifying it, Marie?
Well, it's definitely not simple. And, when I worked for Secretary Kerry, the first year in office, we spent a lot of time, Secretary Kerry did, getting the Middle East peace process restarted. So one of my first trip with him actually, spent a lot of time in Jordan, in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, shuttling back and forth. And we spent hours, days, weeks getting the peace process restarted. We had the Israelis and the Palestinians to the State Department in DC to announce it, and it fell apart, as it always has. There were, again, as it always has, on both sides of this, broken promises and no ability to build trust and move forward. Prime Minister Netanyahu was prime minister then, and it was exceedingly frustrating, I think, for Secretary Kerry, who is very pro-Israel, has worked with Bibi Netanyahu for a long time and other Israeli leaders, and to feel like we were trying to help them and giving them, as you said, so much assistance, the most military assistance in history under the Obama administration, and it felt at times like he was just lying to us and not respecting us as a friend and partner. And I say that to say it's not as simple today. Look, I think there are things we could do in terms of putting some controls on what the Israelis use the weapons we give them for. For example, you can't use them in densely populated areas, right? There are some controls we can put on them. There are people who've argued for a wholesale rethinking of the relationship in terms of security assistance to Israel. Israel has a lot of its own weapons now and has other partners it could get it from. But the bottom line is, Mike, that President Biden deeply believes in this relationship. And I cannot envision a scenario in which he would fundamentally alter the relationship with Israel. I think that Tony Blinken is trying to get Bibi and other Israelis to commit to protecting civilians, to letting these airdrops of food and water in, to letting some of these land corridors open up and get folks out. I think he's chipping away around the margins and trying to negotiate in somewhat tactical things, because I think that at the end of the day, those levers that you mentioned, which exist, will never be pulled by Joe Biden, I think.
It's tough for me to add on to that as somebody, again, never getting to the level of SME, as we like to say in the business world, a subject matter expert that you have in this, and as having covered it. And there's just some of the things that came to my mind earlier today as I was preparing to talk to you, because you have firsthand knowledge of meeting this leader. I love that you just said that about some of the things. Secretary Kerry is very reserved, right? As you have mentioned to me before, he's seems like, I think, a calm man. And all of a sudden he's feeling that certain way about the way Bibi has kind of viewed this relationship. And again, that was 2014, I believe, if not mistaken. You tell me when that was. I believe it was. So, I mean, that's 10 years ago. And now here we are where we are. I did want to ask you, so now let's put back on, Marie's back at the podium at the State Department. And obviously, because this war is being covered holistically, we've seen some of the UN resolutions that have been shot down. So many different outlets are covering this, and there's so many good reporters doing a lot of good work out there. And the biggest thing reporters are supposed to do, and now I'll be the journalist and put the journalist hat on, as you are the State Department spokesperson, is ask questions of why won't you do this? Why won't you do that? I want you to listen to this tense exchange that happened at the State Department between Matthew Miller and one of my colleagues. Well, I don't work at Al Jazeera, but I'll say a colleague because he's a journalist. And I want you to listen to this exchange, and then we're going to react on the other side of not only how you would handle it, but the questions and the way Matt answered the question. So take a listen to this.
Why is it so difficult for this government to say we condemn the killing of children, Palestinian women and children? Why can't you say the word condemn?
We do. Saeed, if you listened to what I said a moment ago, hold on. Saeed, please don't interrupt me.
Yeah.
I said far too many Palestinians have died. Thousands of Palestinian children have died, and it is a tragedy when one of them dies. Of course, we don't want to see a single child die. We don't want to see anyone die as a result of this conflict, which is why we have been working to bring this conflict to a close as soon as possible. But whenever you ask me these questions, I do think you continue to kind of just elide over the fact that Hamas bears a great deal of responsibility for putting those children in harm's way. Remember, it was Hamas that launched this war in the first place with an attack on Israel that killed men, women, and children, and that Hamas that hid and continues to hide behind children as human shields. So yes, we do not want to see any child die. We don't want to see any innocent civilian die, which is why we are working so hard to try to achieve a temporary ceasefire that would alleviate their suffering.
Yet I have not heard the word condemn. I mean, this war began way before October 7. I mean, in fact, the reason that this administration was so strong on, pursuing a Middle East peace and so on, because the war had been going on for decades before and so on. We heard this administration when they came into office talking about reopening the consulate, talking about reopening the PLO office here, talking about restarting and reigniting peace talks and so on, re-aiding UNRWA and so on, simply because that war has been going on for a very long time. Because Gaza was under siege for a very, very long time.
Saeed, nothing.
Before I ask you what I want to ask you, Marie, it is very tough to be on camera, on TV. You may think you're going to say something, and then you go out there and you say something completely different, and you got to find your way through a sentence. I can't imagine what it's like, not only with cameras in a room of 50 people that you're staring at that are asking you questions, that all have recording devices, that all have cameras pointed at you. And I'm sure you have your binder and you have your notes and you're ready and prepared, but it's incredibly hard and challenging. So you may say the wrong word that has the wrong connotation, and now the soundbite lives in infamy. So first and foremost, for you, what'd you make of the exchange, the way Matt kind of answered the question, and take us to a little bit of the experience of being at that podium and answering those questions? It's got to be incredibly tough. I mean, if you search AP images of Marie Harf, there's a bunch of you on the podium, and you're not too happy with some of the questions. So what did you make of the exchange and how it went, and how Matt answered the question, and also how the journalist asked it about using the word condemn violence?
Well, this is fascinating. So first, Saeed, that reporter, is actually Palestinian. He's from East Jerusalem. That's his hometown. So part of what you learn when you're briefing is you get to know journalists as people. And I think that helps. I have so much empathy and sympathy for people at the podium. It is an exceedingly hard job. He is not giving his opinion, right? He's not, he doesn't get to make up what he says. He is projecting the policy of Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and the United States government. And I would guess that they have litigated every single word they will let him say at that podium. And there's a reason he's not saying condemn. If there's not, he should have said it. And if there is, I would urge them to revisit that. Look, I know that every time we say something, what I imagine is happening is that they don't want to say condemn because the Israelis will get upset. and they'll call like they used to when I was at the podium, and they'll complain to Tony Blinken or Joe Biden or Jake Sullivan or someone, right? John Feiner. What I tried to do at the podium, and I don't know how successful I was, but certainly what I would do if I ever had the chance again, like, that didn't pass the smell test. Like, just condemn it, right? Like, is that the hill we want to die on? Why can we not say the thing that we all see with our own eyes, right? And there were times I think that governments do well when they either admit faults, admit they got something wrong, admit something's not going perfectly, or when they just say the truth, right, out loud. And it would be hard pressed for me to understand why saying condemn would so irrevocably hurt our relationship with Israel that he was put in that position that he can't say it. It's really hard when you're in that position and they say, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this. And if you have the trust of the secretary or the NS, you push back and you say, come on, it's a dialogue, right? You're not just a talking point monkey. And so I would hope that he is able to say things that he would like to say that sound sort of like common sense, if that makes sense. It's a really hard job, though,
I was going to say, there's no way that you can convince me that's an easy job. And again, I want to encourage people to type in Marie Harf, State Department, just so you can see some of the images of you.
Some of it's pretty bad, right? There's some bad memes. Like, I was certainly not perfect or even close, but you have to be able, I don't know. It feels like it defies a little bit of logic, right?
Nick, quick break from the pod because this episode is presented by our friends over at SeatGeek. Your next best night ever is waiting, my friend, and they've got the tickets. You want to go to an NBA game, an NFL game, a concert, Major League Baseball, whatever it is, all you got to do is go to SeatGeek.com. You're going to enter in the promo code, Can We Please Talk, and you're going to get $20 off that purchase right now at SeatGeek. Nick, what are you going to do with your $20 off on those tickets, buddy?
I mean, that saves me on anything. I can get food at the game. I can just get the tickets themselves. I mean, baseball's coming along, so I'm excited for that. I can get upper deck tickets and just nothing. And then all I got to do is worry about food. I mean, anywhere I want to use this, it's well worth it. $20 is a worthwhile investment.
That's right. And I've seen you at sporting events. You eat a lot. Nick needs those $20 off. So go to SeatGeek.com right now. Enter in the promo code, Can We Please Talk? You're going to get $20 off that purchase. Well, and I also love that what you just said right there about learning the journalists that cover it and are in the room. We've had a few that are on the show that covered the Pentagon, that covered the State Department. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you knew Saeed was Palestinian and he's been at it for a long time. He's an older gentleman for people that are watching on YouTube that saw the clip. So obviously he, the proverbial dog in this fight, he has because of obviously his blood and heritage. So I just thought the exchange was interesting. But now I want to pivot because there's been some more exchanges between prominent Jewish Americans out there, specifically the host of The Daily Show on Mondays, Jon Stewart, has said some stuff. And obviously Senator Bernie Sanders, who is Jewish, has also said stuff about the aid and calling for an end to giving Israel aid until a temporary ceasefire is put in place. But I did want to play something for you that panned out the other day on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and two journalists that have been covering this conflict. Now, again, Stewart, prominent Jewish man, but has devoted recently a segment on his show about this conflict overall and what is being done about it and the innocent killing that's happening of Palestinians. But listen to this exchange that happened. I want to react on the other side. Take a listen.
Who is incentivized to actually fix this? And isn't the people who really suffer from all of it just the Palestinians, who get no regard from any group, no real support?
I think that was the case for some time, but I think that things have changed in the sense that the Arab countries are very eager to get this off their plate, actually. That's why they had this Arab Peace Initiative and keep reiterating it, because they no longer want to have a conflict with Israel. It's not in their interest. They'd like to move past it, but they cannot do so in a way which ignores the Palestinians. And I think that the idea of the Abraham Accords, for instance, was let's just sidestep this issue and make deals with the Emiratis and Saudis and so forth. I was in Saudi Arabia recently, and I was talking to a broad range of people. I think the idea that the Saudis will make a deal with Israel without a two-state solution or meaningful pathway to one or significant concessions on that subject is very unrealistic because...
No, that's my point,
yes.
is the two-state solution. But if nobody is there to just guarantee everybody has preconditions for everything. You know, Netanyahu, I need a partner for, if you don't meet these certain conditions of no violence, I won't negotiate with you. Well, America occupied Iraq, and there was violence there the entire time. I mean, imagine if we had set a precondition that there'd be no Iraqi government unless, you know, this violence would end. Nothing would ever, it seems like nobody's actually being honest or genuine.
So, Marie, you know, a question I got asked today by my wife was, why don't the Arab countries in that region help? Like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon. Like, why aren't the other countries helping? And, you know, again, I didn't work for the State Department. I didn't travel with Secretary Kerry. So these are tough things to answer. And I tried to explain as best as I could. But first, let's react on the soundbite. Then maybe we'll funnel into some of your answer there. But what'd you make of the exchange there? They talked a little bit about the Abraham Accords. It does seem like there isn't a genuineness because we talked about it before. Bibi does not want a two-state solution. And obviously, you know, with the PLO in the West Bank and what Hamas has done in Gaza, like, there's no path to it. We don't see one, especially after the attacks on October 7th. And now with the hostages still being out there, you know, under Hamas control. So what'd you make of the exchange right there between Jon Stewart and that reporter from The Intercept? And then explain a little bit more about the region and why the other countries are around haven't been able to help on fixing this, you know, idea of a two-state solution.
Well, I think that the Gulf countries, I mean, in general, the Abraham Accords, I think, were a good thing. Any country that pledges to not attack Israel or, you know, does a peace agreement, whatever we want to call them, is a good thing. But at the time, I said they are ignoring the Palestinians and they are leaving the Palestinians out. And one of the only pieces of leverage that they have had to promote the Palestinian cause was this. So the fact that the Saudis, I think, are still quite willing to go ahead with this at some point is really bad for the Palestinians. There are some countries in the region who have helped them. I mean, Jordan has taken enormous numbers of refugees, of Palestinians. Whole parts of Jordan are basically Palestinian now. There are some countries, but the Gulf states particularly have not. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris. I mean, the Qataris have tried to help a little bit, but the Qataris have also hosted much of Hamas's leadership in Doha for a long time. So I think that the Palestinians have been largely forgotten. And Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want a two-state solution, but nobody has been able to answer the questions of where these people are. But these are humans. These are people that have very few rights, very few opportunities, very little economy to speak of. And the fact that it just doesn't seem to matter that they are stateless people living under occupation, a quite brutal one at times, is heartbreaking in many ways. I'm not talking about Hamas, I'm not talking about the terrorists, but I'm talking about sort of average Palestinians. And so, you know, I think that but we also shouldn't take agency away from them. There are some decisions that the Palestinians have to make about their leadership going forward. The Palestinian Authority has been corrupt, feckless, weak, and the Israelis made it weaker by promoting Hamas because they wanted to make the Palestinian Authority weaker. So, you know, we also need leaders among the Palestinians to emerge that will have a different view of what their future can look like. And hopefully that there are some leaders like that, because right now it feels like the Arab leaders the Gulf leaders certainly are largely ignoring them, except when it suits them politically at home. It is a heartbreaking situation in many ways.
It really is. And it appears that there's no end in sight for what's happening in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza as the death toll continues to rise. We'll continue to monitor it as always. Marie, I can't thank you enough for hopping on the program with me today and filling in for Nick Savari. I may have to do the Donald Trump from The Apprentice in season 5 and say, Nikki, you fired, and bring Marie on full time. Thank you so much for being with me, Marie.
I always love to, and it's just one of the few places where we have a lot of time to talk about really serious issues and some lighter issues too. So it's a big week ahead. Get your coffee and your bourbon ready. And, you know, we'll see what it all means.
That's right. We'll see what it all means. If you want to watch the video portion of any of the interviews we've done on the show or see me and Marie's face, check out our YouTube channel, type in Can We Please Talk Podcast. We should pop right up. Audio podcast platforms, you know by now, Apple, Spotify, Google. Shout out to everybody who listens to us on Good Pods. Shout out to everybody who listens to us on YouTube Music. And shout out to Acast, our hosting platform. We can't do it without them. We can't do it without each and every one of you that listens into this program. As always, I am Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time. Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk Podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it. And we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button. Come on, do him a favor. So hit subscribe.